Shocking revelation. Hulk Hogan secretly battled cancer before his death. New hospital reports reveal the untold truth behind Hulk Hogan's final days. Fans are stunned by what really happened. WWE icon Hulk Hogan secretly battled cancer in the months leading up to his tragic death on July 24, 2025. For the first time, newly leaked hospital documents and emotional insider reports confirm that Hogan, known worldwide as the Immortal One, was silently fighting late-stage pancreatic cancer while fans, friends, and the entire wrestling universe remained unaware. In this emotional exposé, we dive deep into the heartbreaking final days of Hulk Hogan's life. From private chemotherapy sessions to hidden hospital visits and final conversations with legends like Ric Flair, John Cena, and The Rock, this video uncovers the untold truth behind Hogan's health crisis. WWE insiders, family members, and real hospital records come together to paint a picture of a warrior who chose to suffer in silence. We will walk you through the heartbreaking details surrounding Hulk Hogan's secret health battle before his passing. For the first time, hospital records confirm that the wrestling icon was quietly battling cancer, a truth kept hidden from the public eye. This video uncovers never-before-heard information, reactions from close friends and family, and the legacy Hogan leaves behind. If you're a fan of wrestling history, real-life tributes, and behind-the-scenes WWE stories, this one's for you. It was a death that rattled the wrestling world to its very core. On July 24, 2025, the announcement of Hulk Hogan's passing shook fans, wrestlers, and celebrities across the globe. For decades, the name Hulk Hogan was synonymous with professional wrestling. He wasn't just a superstar, he was a cultural icon, a symbol of power, resilience, and charisma. But behind the bandanas, the 24-inch pythons, and the immortal catchphrases, a truth was silently eating away at the legend. And now, for the first time, it's been confirmed. Hulk Hogan had been battling cancer in secret before he died. Hospital records obtained just days after his death reveal a devastating medical timeline, one that fans never saw coming, and one the wrestling world may never fully recover from. For months, speculation had surrounded Hogan's health. While he had made occasional public appearances in early 2025, some noticed a change in his demeanor. His trademark energy had dimmed slightly. The booming voice, while still present, carried a weight it hadn't before. His steps were slower, more deliberate. Observers chalked it up to age, years of in-ring punishment, and the natural wear of life. But now we know what fans saw wasn't just age catching up. It was a man facing the final chapter of his life with quiet bravery. The hospital where Hogan was admitted in the days before his passing, Tampa General Hospital, released a heavily redacted but confirmed statement that the wrestling legend had been diagnosed with late-stage pancreatic cancer nearly 9 months prior. This information, kept confidential at the behest of Hogan's family and inner circle, was finally released following consent from his legal representatives. According to the report, Hogan had undergone rounds of chemotherapy in secret, traveling to and from treatment centers under heavy disguise. He kept his appointments early in the morning or late at night, using private hospital entrances, determined to preserve the image of strength his fans had always known. Behind the curtain, it was a very different story. Friends close to the Hall of Famer describe a man in pain, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. One longtime confidant, who asked to remain anonymous, shared that Hogan was suffering more than anyone realized, but insisted on putting up a front for his fans, even when the pain was unbearable. He didn't want anyone to worry, the friend revealed. He wanted to go out the same way he lived, in control, larger than life. WWE insiders have also broken their silence, revealing that Vince McMahon, Triple H, and even Roman Reigns were made aware of Hogan's condition as early as April 2025. But at Hogan's request, no official statement was made. Even though his legacy was undeniable, Hogan didn't want a farewell tour. He didn't want sympathy. He didn't want tears. What he wanted was dignity, privacy, The ability to slip quietly into the shadows, away from the cameras, and fight the hardest battle of his life in silence, yet those close to him say the decision took a toll. Wrestling had always been Hogan's life. His entire identity was forged in the ring, in the roar of the crowd, the weight of the spotlight, the drama of the storyline. To live without it was hard enough. But to face death without it? That was something no one believed he could do. Still, he did. Week after week, while the wrestling world moved on with storylines, new champions, and headline feuds, Hulk Hogan was quietly losing weight, his body weakening, his muscles shrinking. He watched from the shadows, cheering on the future of the business he helped build, never once making himself the center of attention. Until his final breath, Hogan stayed loyal to the business, the fans, and the character he had carried for nearly 5 decades. The signs, in hindsight, were all there. In early interviews from 2025, Hogan often wore long sleeves, even in Florida's summer heat. Some fans noticed a drastic change in his face, sunken cheeks, dark circles under his eyes. Yet every time he was asked about his health, he deflected with a smile. "Brother, I'm feeling great," he said during his final public podcast appearance. Still training, still living, still believing. But the truth was far more painful. According to doctors cited in the hospital documents, Hogan's cancer had metastasized to his liver by the time it was discovered. Though treatment began immediately, the prognosis was never promising. Privately, Hogan had begun preparing for the end. Close friends say he made peace with many people from his past, those he had feuded with both inside and outside the ring. He reportedly called Bret Hart, sharing words of respect and apology for their complicated history. He reached out to Ric Flair, who was battling his own health scares, and spoke to Stone Cold Steve Austin for over an hour in what one source described as a deeply emotional conversation about legacy, fatherhood, and regrets. But perhaps most heartbreaking of all were his final moments with his family. His daughter Brooke and son Nick were said to be by his side when he passed, holding his hands, whispering memories, telling him he had done enough, that he could let go. Brooke, in a statement released just days after his death, hinted at the truth before it became public. "My father was the strongest man I ever knew, not just because of what he did in the ring, but because of how he faced the end. He didn't want pity. He just wanted peace. He fought like a warrior until he didn't have to fight anymore." Fans worldwide have since flooded social media with tributes, sharing memories of meeting Hogan, photos of him at fan conventions, videos of their favorite matches. But now, those memories are tinged with something deeper: understanding. The weight of knowing that while he entertained millions with unmatched charisma, he was also fighting the most terrifying opponent of all, mortality. The wrestling world's reaction has been overwhelming. WWE opened their most recent Raw episode with a 10-bell salute, a tribute video playing across the Titantron, filled with iconic moments. The slam heard round the world at WrestleMania 3, the fiery promos, the legendary poses. Michael Cole's voice broke as he narrated the tribute. "He wasn't just the immortal one in name," he said. "He lived and died a legend." Current WWE superstars have shared their reactions as well. Roman Reigns tweeted, "You taught us what it meant to be larger than life. Rest easy, Hulk." Seth Rollins wrote, "The yellow and red were more than colors, they were a revolution. Thank you, brother." Even CM Punk, who has long been critical of Hogan's backstage politics, posted a simple image of Hogan with the caption, "Respect where it's due. RIP." But beyond the ring, what makes this revelation even more profound is the lesson it leaves behind. Hogan's decision to keep his battle private wasn't about pride, it was about purpose. He didn't want to cloud his legacy with sadness. He wanted fans to remember the man who flexed, who ran wild, who stood tall against giants and overcame the odds. He didn't want pity, he wanted permanence. And now, knowing the full story, that legacy feels even more heroic. In private, Hogan had reportedly written letters to be released posthumously. These letters, according to sources, contain messages of gratitude, forgiveness, and most importantly, love. "Tell my fans I heard them," one excerpt allegedly reads. I felt their cheers, even when they weren't there. Every child who said, "What ya gonna do?" Every parent who passed on the legacy, they made me feel like more than a man. They made me immortal. Perhaps that's why his story resonates so deeply today. Because we weren't just mourning a wrestler. We were mourning the final chapter of an era. The end of the man who stood on the front lines of wrestling's golden age. Who carried it into the mainstream. Who gave kids hope, strength, and a sense of invincibility. But behind that legend was Terry Bollea. A man who, when stripped of the spotlight, faced the same fear, pain, and uncertainty as anyone else. And in that truth, his legacy only grows larger. Let us remember him not only for the red and yellow, the entrance music, or the flexed poses. Let us remember him for the courage it took to face death alone. For the grace it took to hide his pain. For the strength it took to keep smiling when his world was quietly fading away. Hulk Hogan died a hero, but more importantly, he lived as one. In the days following the confirmation of Hulk Hogan's secret cancer battle, tributes have poured in from across the wrestling universe, creating a wave of emotion so massive that even the stiffest personalities in the industry couldn't hide their grief. What was once just mourning has become a collective reckoning, a global goodbye to the man who laid the foundation for modern wrestling as we know it. But beyond the carefully crafted tributes and official statements, what's happening now is something far more intimate. The wrestling world, its fans, its stars, and its history, is confronting the raw humanity of a legend who dared to die on his own terms. In Connecticut, at WWE headquarters, flags were lowered to half-mast. A private gathering was held the day after Hogan's death, attended only by WWE executives and a few select superstars past and present. Vince McMahon, now retired but still deeply connected to the industry, was seen arriving in black, escorted through a side entrance with little fanfare. Inside the building, a small shrine had been created. At its center, Hogan's signature red and yellow feathered boa, carefully laid across a replica of the Intercontinental Championship belt. Surrounding it, framed photographs from the 1980s, moments that once electrified Madison Square Garden, Wembley Stadium, and arenas across the world. Triple H, now head of creative and talent relations, gave a eulogy so emotionally charged it was said that several employees had to excuse themselves. He wasn't perfect, Triple H admitted. But he was powerful. He made wrestling cool before anyone else did. And he did it with a heart so big, it could lift an entire generation of kids who believed in something more. Stephanie McMahon added, "He taught us the value of presence. That sometimes just walking through the curtain with conviction and fire in your chest was enough to make a room believe." And then there was Ric Flair, the nature boy who had shared both friendship and fierce rivalry with Hogan, posted a video on Instagram just hours after the hospital report was leaked. Dressed in black and speaking with the tremble of a man barely holding himself together, Flair said, "We fought. God knows we fought. In the ring, behind the curtain. But we were brothers in the business. And I always thought somehow he'd live forever. But now I know, he just did his fighting in silence. And I'll never stop respecting that." The wave of emotion has spread beyond the WWE bubble. AEW's Tony Khan opened their weekly show with a heartfelt segment, something rarely done for non-AEW talent. Kenny Omega, who never shared a ring with Hogan, addressed the crowd. "None of us would be here without him. Love him or hate him, he changed the sport forever." At the WWE Performance Center in Orlando, trainees gathered around the large screen usually reserved for match breakdowns and promo classes. This time, the screen showed highlights of Hulkamania, the roaring fans, the dramatic leg drops, the exaggerated cup tears that sent arenas into frenzies. Several young talents, many of whom hadn't even been born during Hogan's heyday, watched with tears in their eyes. "He gave us the dream," one aspiring wrestler whispered. "He gave us the reason to want this life." Among the most personal reactions came from John Cena. In a rare emotional appearance on Good Morning America, Cena spoke candidly about his relationship with Hogan. "He was my idol before he became my mentor. When I was a kid, I wore the colors. When I got to WWE, I wore the respect. And when I got to know him as a man, I saw the layers. He didn't let people see behind the curtain much. But when he did, man, it was vulnerable. It was real. Cena paused, fighting back tears. And now we know. Now the world sees what he was carrying. And I just hope he knows how proud we all are of him. The fans have responded in ways that only reinforce how deeply Hogan's story affected millions. Candlelight vigils were held outside the old arenas he once headlined: Madison Square Garden, the Pontiac Silverdome, the Staples Center. At Tampa's Raymond James Stadium, a mural was painted almost overnight, Hogan with his fists raised to the sky, a golden halo above his head, the words, "You fought for us. We remember," scrawled beneath. Thousands have also taken to social media to share personal stories of meeting Hogan. A viral post showed a young boy in the 1990s wearing a Hulkamaniac tank top, grinning ear to ear with Hogan crouched beside him. The boy, now a firefighter, wrote, "When my dad left, I wore your shirt to school every day. You made me feel like I had someone strong in my corner. I never got to say thank you. So here it is. Thank you, Hulk." But it isn't just the nostalgia or the star power or the symbolism that's fueling this outpouring. It's the fact that now, in his absence, the truth has reshaped the legacy. Fans are no longer just celebrating Hulk Hogan the wrestler, they're mourning Terry Bollea, the man, the human, the father, the warrior who didn't need the world to know his pain to fight it anyway. The revelation has sparked an entirely new conversation in the wrestling community, one about mortality, masculinity, and what it means to suffer in silence. For years, the wrestling industry has operated on a code of toughness. No weakness, no vulnerability. But Hogan's story, now revealed in full, is forcing that code to bend. And maybe, just maybe, it's creating space for other wrestlers to speak out about their own struggles. Already, reports indicate that several WWE superstars have privately begun reaching out to therapists and mental health professionals, encouraged by the emotional fallout of Hogan's death. In the Performance Center, trainers are opening sessions with wellness check-ins. If Hogan, the immortal one, could go through that and still carry himself with pride, one wrestler said, then we can talk about our battles too. Backstage at SmackDown, it's said that Paul Heyman organized an impromptu locker room meeting where he shared stories about Hogan's time in ECW, about how he once donated a substantial amount of money to an injured wrestler without ever taking credit. The world knew Hulk Hogan, Heyman told the room. But very few knew Terry. And what I can tell you is this: he was more generous, more complicated, and more human than any of us realized. As the WWE continues to pay tribute through weekly packages, legacy documentaries, and merchandise proceeds benefiting cancer foundations, fans are left to wrestle with their own memories. The interviews, the betrayals, the comebacks, the controversies. And yet, when you pull it all back, when you peel away the headlines and scandals, what you're left with is a man who built an empire out of charisma, sweat, and faith. A man who once told millions of children to say their prayers and eat their vitamins. And who, in the end, followed his own advice with heartbreaking devotion. This final chapter of Hulk Hogan's life may be the most defining of all, not because it ends in death, but because it was lived with dignity and courage in the shadows, away from the roar. The man who once embodied the noise of the wrestling ring chose to face his end in silence. And that silence speaks volumes. As fans continue to mourn, reflect, and share, one thing is clear: Hogan's immortality was never in the ring. It was in the hearts he touched, the children he inspired, the wrestlers he paved the way for, the millions who still scream Hulkamania, not because of a catchphrase, but because of what it represents: strength, resilience, and now, grace. Let this be his legacy. Let this be his truth. In the weeks following Hulk Hogan's death and the earth-shattering revelation of his private battle with cancer, WWE began laying the groundwork for what would become the most elaborate posthumous tribute in the history of professional wrestling. This was more than a ceremonial nod to a fallen legend. It was a reckoning a rewriting of narrative. A global acknowledgement that the face of an industry had departed not in spectacle, but in quiet suffering, shielded from public view, cloaked in the one thing Hogan never wore in the ring: vulnerability. The decision came quickly. WWE would host a dedicated pay-per-view event titled Immortal, a celebration of Hulk Hogan, slated for Madison Square Garden, the very arena where Hogan's superstardom ignited in the 1980s. For Vince McMahon and the higher-ups, there was no debate. This event would be unprecedented, an emotional, industry-wide send-off that paid homage not just to Hogan the performer, but to Terry Bollea, the man behind the legend. Tickets sold out in minutes. AW and JPW, Impact Wrestling, and even retired WCW executives were invited to attend or contribute tribute messages. In death, Hogan had done the unthinkable. He united the fractured wrestling world, if only for one night. That night, the crowd was electric, but also hushed. The signature red and yellow flooded the arena, not in neon celebration, but in reverent memory. A giant LED screen played Hogan's most iconic moments. Slamming Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3, pointing to the heavens after every victory, carrying the American flag during the Gulf War era of WWF programming. But the climax came with a brand new video package, never-before-seen home footage, private moments with his children, candid conversations from the hospital, and the recording of Hogan's last words to his fans. "Paul's the only one who said something real," he admitted. But it was too late. Behind the scenes, WWE officials scrambled. Sponsors began asking questions. Shareholders demanded a formal response plan. The Hogan death, once viewed as a tragic chapter, was now spiraling into a reputational firestorm, and into that storm walked someone unexpected. Tony Khan, AEW's founder and president, long seen as WWE's rival, had kept quiet during the Hogan tributes. Some speculated it was out of respect. Others thought it was strategic restraint. But on the first AEW Dynamite following Triple H's statement, Tony Khan stepped into the ring, not as a boss, but as a mourner. "This isn't about brands," Khan said to the camera. "This is about legacy. About a man who helped shape all of this, long before most of us ever laced up a pair of boots." Terry Bollea, Hulk Hogan, was complicated. But he was also undeniable. He then made a surprise announcement. AEW would establish its own Legends Fund, a permanent, non-profit arm of the company dedicated to supporting retired wrestlers, regardless of promotion history. Medical expenses, mental health care, living stipends, all of us owe something to the people who paved the road we're walking now, Khan said. And if we're not willing to give back when the cheers fade, then we don't deserve to be in this business. The crowd roared, and the message was clear. WWE's silence had cost them more than a reputation. It had cost them the moral high ground. By the end of the week, WWE faced intense pressure to clarify what changes, if any, were actually happening behind the scenes. Leaks began to flow. Internal memos revealed plans for a new WWE Legacy Board that would include past superstars like Shawn Michaels, Edge, Lita, and Booker T, with full authority to advocate for the medical, financial, and emotional needs of veteran talent. But the documents also revealed something more chilling. At least 6 other WWE legends had recently requested assistance from the company, and were still waiting for responses at the time of Hogan's death. One of them was reportedly Jake the Snake Roberts, another Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Both men had mounting medical bills. Both men had asked WWE for help in some form: appearance bookings, wellness referrals, transportation support. Neither had received definitive follow-up, and now, the fans were connecting the dots. Hogan's death wasn't just a tragedy. It was a warning. The Royal Rumble that year, just weeks after the scandal broke, opened with an empty spotlight in the center of the ring. No music. No pyro. Just silence. The commentary team didn't speak for the first 30 seconds. Then, Michael Cole's voice broke through. "Tonight, we remember a man who built this. Who is this? And who deserved better than what he got?" It wasn't just a tribute. It was an admission, and then his music hit, the classic real American theme. The crowd didn't cheer at first. They stood, some cried. Wrestlers backstage stood in the gorilla position, heads bowed. Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, Cody Rhodes, and Rey Mysterio lined up behind the curtain, just off camera, to watch the tribute unfold. They were no longer just superstars. They were witnesses. An era-ending. A reckoning unfolding. A promise whispered across arenas. Never again. The arena had emptied. The cameras had cut. But in the quiet corners of that Monday night, something seismic had changed. Triple H's unscripted tribute, the shaking voice, the cracking confession, the vow that no legend would ever again be forgotten, was not a conclusion. It was a detonation. And its aftershock reached far beyond the WWE universe, because the people who felt it the deepest weren't in the arena, they were watching from somewhere else. In silence. In heartbreak, Brooke Hogan and Nick Hogan, for years, the Hogan children had lived in the blast radius of their father's fame. They were born into the roar of crowds, the glare of flashbulbs, the shadow of a man too large for any one ring. Brooke had sung national anthems at wrestling events. Nick had once dreamt of following his dad's footsteps. But as their father aged and the cameras drifted away, so too did the shield of invincibility that once protected them from the real world. When news of Hulk Hogan's passing broke, neither child made a public statement for 48 hours. That silence wasn't strategy. It was devastation. According to a family friend, Brooke refused to believe it was real until she saw the official coroner's report with her own eyes. What she did next was something no one in WWE expected. She declined Vince McMahon's phone call. That alone made headlines. But the real eruption came when Brooke Hogan posted a 9-minute video to her verified social media accounts. Tear-streaked, trembling, unfiltered. "I'm not gonna smile through this," she began. "I'm not gonna read from a script. I'm not gonna thank WWE for a tribute package that felt more like damage control than love. I'm gonna tell the truth. Because my dad deserves that much." She went on to describe her father's final months, how he'd wake up in pain every single morning, how he couldn't climb stairs without assistance, how his phone calls to WWE got shorter and colder over time. He didn't want a return match. He didn't want to be in the spotlight again. He wanted to feel seen. That's all. He wanted to know that the world he helped build still had a place for him in it. Brooke's voice cracked. She stared into the camera like she was speaking directly to the very heart of WWE. "He called some of you. You know who you are." He left voicemails. Begging. Not for money. Not for a favor. Just to be remembered. That video would be replayed more than 40 million times in 72 hours. Nick Hogan remained silent longer. But when he emerged, it was with fire. He spoke to ESPN, sitting in a darkened interview room, clad in a black hoodie. No music. No nostalgia. Just anger. They knew he was breaking down, Nick said. And they ignored it. They used him for ratings. For nostalgia pops. They booked him like a mascot, but never checked if the man inside the suit was okay. When asked about Triple H's public confession, Nick paused. "Paul's the only one who said something real," he admitted. But it was too late. Behind the scenes, WWE officials scrambled. Sponsors began asking questions. Shareholders demanded a formal response plan. The Hogan death, once viewed as a tragic chapter, was now spiraling into a reputational firestorm, and into that storm walked someone unexpected. Tony Khan. AEW's founder and president, long seen as WWE's rival, had kept quiet during the Hogan tributes. Some speculated it was out of respect. Others thought it was strategic restraint. But on the first AEW Dynamite following Triple H's statement, Tony Khan stepped into the ring, not as a boss, but as a mourner. "This isn't about brands," Khan said to the camera. "This is about legacy. About a man who helped shape all of this, long before most of us ever laced up a pair of boots." Terry Bollea, Hulk Hogan, was complicated. But he was also undeniable. He then made a surprise announcement. AEW would establish its own Legends Fund, a permanent, nonprofit arm of the company dedicated to supporting retired wrestlers, regardless of promotion history. Medical expenses, mental health care, living stipends, all of us owe something to the people who paved the road we're walking now, Khan said. And if we're not willing to give back when the cheers fade, then we don't deserve to be in this business. The crowd roared, and the message was clear. WWE's silence had cost them more than a reputation. It had cost them the moral high ground. By the end of the week, WWE faced intense pressure to clarify what changes, if any, were actually happening behind the scenes. Leaks began to flow. Internal memos revealed plans for a new WWE Legacy Board. That would include past superstars like Shawn Michaels, Edge, Lita, and Booker T, with full authority to advocate for the medical, financial, and emotional needs of veteran talent. But the documents also revealed something more chilling. At least 6 other WWE legends had recently requested assistance from the company, and were still waiting for responses at the time of Hogan's death. One of them was reportedly Jake the Snake Roberts, another hacksaw Jim Duggan. Both men had mounting medical bills. Both men had asked WWE for help in some form: appearance bookings, wellness referrals, transportation support. Neither had received definitive follow-up, and now the fans